To Georgia, where Mikheil Kavelashvili has been sworn in as president, despite allegations that his election was illegitimate. The far-right former footballer is supported by the pro-Kremlin Georgian Dream Party, whose decision to suspend EU membership talks has sparked months of protests.
This is the moment Georgia's opposition hoped would never happen. A far-right, pro-Kremlin former soccer player taking the oath of office as the new president. In his speech, Mikheil Kavelashvili promised to reunite the country.
I plan to be everyone's president, regardless of whether they like me or not. My future efforts will be directed towards the consolidation and unification of society.
But outside, outgoing leader Salome Sarabashvili told supporters in front of the presidential palace that she views the new incumbent as illegitimate and will fight on. Legitimacy comes from one source, and that source is you. And where there is no trust of the people, there will be no legitimacy. Sabanadze did agree to vacate the presidential palace, but she's refusing to formally concede unless last October's disputed parliamentary elections are held again. Like many, but not all Georgians, she claims the poll won by the pro-Russian Georgian Dream Party was fraudulent.
Right now we're all supporting our legitimate president Salome Zurabishvili. She represents us on international arena, so for us she's the only hope right now.
There's no new president. As President Salome Zurabishvili said, people have not even paid attention to it. Also the ceremony that they tried to hold in the parliament, that was a disgrace.
Mikheil Kavelashvili will be a great president. He is my president. He is everyone's president. He's a patriotic person. That is the most important thing.
The post of president is largely ceremonial, but it has come to represent the tensions between Georgians who see their future in the EU, in line with the constitution, and those who would rather see their country return to Russia's orbit and who are now in power.
Let's welcome Natalie Sabanadze. She is the former Georgian ambassador to the EU and a senior research fellow at Chatham House. Nice to have you with us. I'd like to start by asking you if outgoing President Salome Zurabishvili is right in refusing to concede. Could this, in fact, cause further instability and division?
First of all, thank you for having me. The crisis in Georgia has been going on for a very long time. It's more than a month. The month is probably the biggest protest that we have seen, but in fact, the crisis started already in spring with the adoption of the foreign agents law by the ruling party, then Georgian Dream, then the elections, which President Zurabishvili, the opposition, and quite a large segment of the population rejected and considered to be rigged. These allegations have been largely backed by foreign observation missions, including the OSCE, ODIHR, and IRI, who judged the elections to be deeply flawed, raising concerns that they did not really represent the will of the people. So Zurabishvili's claim is that this parliament is illegitimate. It does not represent the will of the people. And since the parliament was supposed to elect the new president, the election of Mr. Kavelashvili, as you rightly noted, a far-right extremist politician who has very limited political career and also limited credentials, also not having a high education degree, for example, and so on. So she considers this procedure entirely to be illegitimate. However, this morning, she addressed the population, the public, out of the palace, and she left the palace. She said that she was not going to stay there and create a show out of it because the presidency is an institution, not a building, and she intends to continue to play the role of the president. However, her term is up. And now basically we have a situation of two people claiming presidency, a further deepening political and constitutional crisis, and potentially deepening economic crisis, because the country has been at the standstill for almost a month.
You have said that last October's elections in Georgia were not only about Georgian democracy, but also about rescuing its European perspective. Do you think that perspective might have shifted now that the new president has been sworn in?
The perspective is there. However, the major blow to Georgia's European aspirations have been delivered on 28th of November when Mr. Koch, who considers himself as the prime minister of Georgia, basically announced that the government was halting any accession talks until 2028. The candidate that has been installed today as Georgia's president is known for his Eurosceptical, anti-Western position. So this current configuration, the Georgian dream with the nominated president, are not going to put Georgia back on the track of European integration. So the protests actually have been largely triggered by this announcement on 28th of November. There were protests, as I said, after the elections, but the scale and the deepening of the crisis really followed this kind of official rejection of European accession by the Georgian dream.
You've criticized the EU's response to recent events, not only the crackdown, for example, but the election as well. Does it really come down to the EU's lack of consensus, or why do you think they were so unprepared?
Well, there are some objective reasons. I mean, consensus is one, but the EU does find itself in a very unusual situation. This is a candidate country, and for the first time, probably, that the candidate country decides to withdraw from the process. The leaders of the country basically equated conditionality, which is a tried and tested process for the EU enlargement, with the blackmail, and said that they basically had enough and they want to deprive the EU of this leverage. At the same time, for the EU, they feel the need to engage whoever is in the effective control, because this is immediate neighborhood. As I said, it's a candidate country, and the solution out of this crisis needs to be found. There is no consensus, so strong signals are not being sent, but the EU did adopt a largely symbolic but still important decision to suspend visa liberalization for the holders of diplomatic and service passports. Now, this is not going to prevent Georgian officials from traveling to Europe, but it is a signal. However, reactions from the US have been much stronger, and they have been escalating in proportion to the deepening of the crisis. So the most recent decision has been made by the US Treasury to put the head, basically de facto ruler of Georgia and the founder and funder of the Georgian Dream Party, who happens to be also the richest man in Georgia, on the list of financially sanctioned individuals. And it was quite important. The justification of this was that he stands accused of dismantling Georgia's democracy and by doing so, aiding Russia's interests. In addition, the Minister of Interior and other officials have been sanctioned under Magnitsky list for the violence against protesters. So the pressure from the US has intensified considerably.
Our thanks to Natalie Sabanadze, a former Georgian ambassador to the EU and a senior research fellow at Chatham House.
Thank you.
DW reporter Anja Koch is on the ground for us in Tbilisi. Anja, tell us a bit more about Mikheil Kavelashvili and why he is seen as controversial by many.
Well, if you ask people in Tbilisi on a street like this, the first thing they will tell you about the new president is he used to be a soccer player. And why is that important? It is important because It's something that makes many people angry, at least those who oppose him, because they say, or they feel that this is basically the only qualification that he has. And they say, listen, a new president running this country, he should at least have some higher education. He does have, however, political experience. He has been a member of the Georgian parliament, as a member of the ruling Georgian Dream Party since 2016. But he's also a known member of a far-right political movement, a movement that is known for anti-Western, Kremlin-friendly rhetoric. And he's not only controversial as a person, but what's also controversial about him is how he actually got into the job. For the very first time here in Georgia, the president was not elected directly by the Georgian people, but by an electoral college. Now, half of those members of this electoral college come from the parliament. However, the question still looming in Georgia is if that parliament is actually legitimate. It was elected in late October, and there have been reports about massive fraud. So the people opposing the president, they will say, listen, the parliament is not legitimate, then the electoral college is not legitimate, so the president then cannot be legitimate either.
Kavelashvili gave his inauguration speech just this morning. What did he say?
Well, interestingly, he did not give any idea or outline on what he thinks the political future of Georgia looks like or what he would like to do when he's in office. Instead, he centered his speech on what he calls traditional Georgian families and family values, saying that those Georgian traditional families, as he puts it, are at the core of the Georgian society. Now, this comes just weeks after the implementation of a so-called anti-LGBTQ propaganda law, a law that the government says is aimed at strengthening those what they call traditional families. But the queer community, of course, they fear that this law is meant to target their ways of living.
Now, the outgoing president, Salome Zurabishvili, is refusing to step down. What happens next?
Exactly. She is refusing to step down because she is following this argument that when the parliament is not legitimate, then the electoral college is not legitimate, then the president, the incoming president, is not either. So she says she is the only legitimate figure in Georgia at the moment. There have been rumors in the past weeks that she could refuse to leave the presidential palace here in Tbilisi. Now, she gave a statement this morning saying that this is not what she's going to do. She is going to leave the palace because she says that the presidency itself is not tied to like a building. She says she will leave the building, but she will remain the legitimate president of Georgia because she feels that the presidency comes with the trust of the people, and she feels she has that trust.
Anja Koch there reporting from the Georgian capital, Tbilisi.